Hi, this is Shep, Altshuler, publisher of TimeSharing Today. Welcome to this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio, featuring news and views of owners and industry professionals. Among the key challenges facing many older legacy resorts are the development and implementation of a plan to refurbish and upgrade their properties. Every owner, board member, and manager should understand the need for having these plans to keep up with the trends that will appeal to the resort's owners, new and younger buyers, exchangers, and renters. Today we are being joined by Mary Daust, Vice President, and Cam Abascal, Senior Associate Designer and Project Manager with Orlando-based Hospitality Resources and Design. They will be providing an in-depth look into the elements that go into property improvement plans for legacy resorts. Hi, Mary and Cam. Welcome to the broadcast.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
This is my pleasure. Mary, spend a few minutes, tell our listeners about, Hospitality Resources and Design and the services that you provide.
Hospitality Resources and Design is a licensed interior design firm that's located in Orlando, Florida. We specialize in hospitality interior refurbishments and renovations. In addition, we do some hotel new builds. So our services, they go across the entire hospitality industry when you think of interior refurbishments. We do the design work, we do the purchasing, we do the install, we have a project management team, we have an AutoCAD team so we can do all the space planning and custom design to make hospitality interiors look great.
Good. Maybe you both want to take a few minutes to explain why it's important for timeshare owners at older resorts to make sure their boards of directors are preparing for renovations and refurbishment.
This is Mary. Renovations and refurbishments are inevitable, and they have to take place for a property to stay as a successful business or a desired travel destination. A renovation must take place to maintain the standards and expectation of their current owners, future owners, and potential renters. So it's really important that the board of directors always stays on point with the concept that it does have to take place, and it's best if they plan in advance. And Cam can kind of go into it. A plan generally takes about a year to develop, so the board of directors needs to be on point a year in advance to make something transpire.
And Cam, do you want to add to that?
Yes, exactly. I think Mary kind of touched on it. Well-appointed guest rooms are going to result in positive feedback from guests and, increased occupancies, which means more owner retention and prompt payment of maintenance fees, et cetera. So in keeping up with that, it's critical that everybody understand that the rooms have to stay fresh and current and speak to, a broad group of people, new owners, existing owners, and really just kind of stay current for everyone involved.
So it's not an easy process, and I thought, Cam, maybe you can spend a little bit of time providing some details about the actual renovation refurbishment process.
Absolutely. The process usually would begin with a general discussion with the parties involved. The board would either contact us or we would contact them or the property managers and decide and discuss a general scope, which also includes most times a site visit by Mary or one of our team. And then at that time, preliminary budgets sort of discussed. A plan of action can be developed which will detail what improvements can be made at the time and how they can be implemented, either phased by selecting specific elements of the refurbish or by doing a complete renovation, but then taking into account how many units can be taken down at one time and whether it will be specific areas rolling from one unit to the next or one floor to the next. And sometimes it can be relatively quick and be completed within the year. Sometimes it is phased over several years. And it really just depends on an open dialogue between us and the board or the property managers. Once that's decided, a conceptual design is developed and presented either digitally, depending on how quickly it needs to be done, and also logistics of where we are and they are, or many times and most often we'll do it in person. And we'll come there with elaborate design boards, etc., so that we can really convey the design that we think is going to best represent the property and function well for everyone there. At the same time, a preliminary proposal is created with a budget in mind that had been discussed previously. And then we'd provide, of course, floor plans and CAD drawings also to convey what the final design would be. The board is then given an opportunity, along with their owners and property managers, a chance to evaluate and deliberate over what they've seen. And once we get feedback on that, we fine-tune it to meet the board or the property's expectations. We pride ourselves on making sure everybody's happy with that, and then we would move to a final proposal to be approved and create very detailed specifications for sign-off. And we need to keep in mind that this process needs to take place at least 4 to 5 months out, depending on the scope of the work to be completed. Obviously, with contract goods and custom furnishings, it does take time for these things to be fabricated, so we like to make sure that we allow ourselves at least 4 to 5 months out from the actual time where things would arrive to the property and be installed. We want to mention, too, that we often will offer a model unit as an option. While they can cost as much as 35 to 40% more than the actual units when you buy in volume, a lot of times it's worth it to do that, because if there is anything that needs to be tweaked, we can do that before the property orders for all of the units. And then at the time of sign-off, a deposit is requested. It's usually 50% of the product at that point. And once it's ordered, we as a design firm track the product and work with the property to coordinate the logistics of the arrival to the site. And oftentimes we'll be working with general contractors and other professionals. If we are coordinating the install, we always work professional installation companies, or sometimes the contractors will install as well. We feel it's best to make sure that we use a team of professionals, who can efficiently and safely get the product into the rooms. And oftentimes this will save the property from damage or mistakes that can cost time and money in the end, because you do want to make sure you use professionals to do that. And then at closing, we'll do a recap with the property and also provide a care and maintenance binder to the property so that they understand how they can care for their newly remodeled unit.
So that's a very thorough, in-depth process that obviously the resorts have to go through in order to keep up with whatever the current trends are. And Mary, there might be some confusion about what the products are. So could you explain the terminology, the differences between commercial and residential products?
Absolutely, and it is very important that every board member knows the difference of a licensed interior designer and then just a decorator, and that kind of falls into the residential and commercial. Commercial-grade contract items that go within a unit, they go through an entire specification of testing and fire rating and all different types of tests. Residential product does not. For instance, I'll just use a few examples. Fabrics. All vertical fabrics that go within a unit, your window treatments, your bed skirt, all those are tested for your fire ratings, for your flame spread. In addition, all the fabric that goes on your seating, that's tested for double rubs, meaning how many times can someone sit on it and get up and sit on it and get up so it won't show wear. All those fabrics, in addition, have top treatments and under treatments, so if someone sits on your sofa and they have suntan lotion, the fabric doesn't absorb it, or red wine is spilt on it, it doesn't absorb it. All of commercial-grade fabrics have those special testing and regulations that are mandated by fire regulations and within the industry, so all the product in the guest room can withstand the hard use of timeshare. In addition, another example is carpet. Commercial-grade contract carpet has, for most often, 32-ounce solution-dyed nylon. That's a standard item in a guest room. Residential carpet does not go through any of that testing. So residential carpet, you could drop red wine, bleach, any of those items, and it would absorb and it would stain. Commercial contract-grade carpet will not do that. So there is a huge difference of residential and commercial, and it's very important that any timeshare board director or member make sure that whatever licensed professional they're utilizing to do their renovation knows the difference, because it could impact the quality and the longevity of the products used in the guest room.
From your experience, have you gone on site to do an analysis of resorts, and do you see a frequency of residential products being used as opposed to commercial products? Is that fairly common or not common?
It is very common. It's very common that someone within the board makes a decision that they can get let's use a sleeper sofa, for example. They can get a sleeper sofa at the local residential furniture store, and it costs half of a commercial grade, so they decide that that's in the best interest of the property, and then that sofa, that lifespan is only 2 to 3 years, and it will break down and it will fall apart, and the fabric will get stained and the mechanism will break. I see sofas are the most common ones that they use residential product in a commercial application, and if you think of the lifespan, you're going to have to replace it so much quicker, and it's a bad investment, but that happens.
So it does occur. Now, there is some terminology that could probably use some explanation. What is meant by the terms reusing, recycling, and repurposing?
A couple different explanations there. Reusing is, I'll use an example there that we see pretty often. People used to use TV armoires in their guest units, and nobody uses those big box TVs anymore, so you can reuse that piece of furniture by cutting the top off and putting a piece of granite, then it becomes a TV stand. So that's an example of reusing. Recycling, we see that a lot when we're going in to do a complete renovation. You can take the existing carpet, pull it out, and recycle it so it doesn't go into a landfill. You can take those drapes and you can give them to Habitat for Humanity. You can take almost every item that's within a guest room and recycle it so it doesn't go in a landfill. That's very common. There's a lot of programs that facilitate that. And if you read up about energy efficiency and LEED and all the other elements that you can do in hospitality, you can get tons of ideas of how you can recycle. So that's recycling and repurposing. Reusing, if an item is still good, if your coffee tables, if your end tables, if your nightstands, if they're still good, just reuse them. Don't feel the need to replace everything at once. If it's still in good shape, it's not dinged, it's not damaged, just reuse it.
And Cam, why is it important for resorts to prepare a property improvement plan, and what are the objectives of these plans?
Yep, often referred to as a PIP, Property Improvement Plan. It's critical that you set forth sort of a plan of action, and a property improvement plan does several things. It outlines an overall objective for the property improvement, so you have a clear overall objective of where everyone is trying to get to. Oftentimes it clarifies standards that must be upheld within the refurbishment and a means of approval. There needs to be some sort of guideline as far as where do you want your resort or your property to fall. Do you have standards that need to be met and achieved with this refurbishment? You know, obviously some properties have very strict standards about what needs to be in the room, whether it be flat screen TV or specifics on seating and things of that nature. And so you want to make sure that those are outlined in the PIP. Also, what elements have you decided need to be upgraded? So usually a PIP requires an objective look at the property and then an outline of what is it that needs to be changed, which elements truly are showing the wear and tear and need to be improved, and which are okay. You know, what's in there that we can keep, that looks good, and that's going to continue to last. A PIP can also include images of the areas that are to be improved, and then along with that, some images of what the new look should be. So it gives everybody an opportunity to see this is where we're at and this is where we want to go. It may not be the exact photograph of what you're going to have in the room, but it gives you a concept of kind of where you're going. And then finally, it defines a timeline for completion, which is critical because you want to have deadlines. You need to meet deadlines for everyone involved, and from a financial perspective as well. So it does all of those things. Some PIPs can be very elaborate and be countless pages. Others can be very, very short. You know, it really just depends on the scope of work. But I think it's important, regardless of how much or how little you're trying to do, to have a PIP in place because it really does give you a roadmap to follow.
Why should cherry-picking refurbishment items be avoided?
Well, cherry picking, and you know, for those of us who may or may not be familiar with that term, you know, cherry picking just means you're going to go in there and you're going to say, oh, that lampshade is just in terrible condition, so I'm just going to replace that lampshade. And then when you actually evaluate the lamp overall, is the lamp functioning? Should you really be replacing your lighting with something that is more current, maybe has convenience outlets in it, etc. So why are you going to go and spend, you know, money now on a lampshade when you're putting it on a very old lamp? It's kind of like when, you know, you've got this super old car that you know you have to replace, and you go out and put brand new tires on it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense all the time. So you have to be cautious with that, and you don't want a disjointed overall look. A lot of times when you start cherry picking this piece, that piece, you end up with a very disjointed look at the end of the day. And even if you don't have the funds or the means to do everything at once, if you can have, again, that roadmap of where you want the unit to be at the end of the day, and that might be a year or 2 years down the road, if you at least have a roadmap, you can then say, okay, we're going to improve these 3 elements right now, and we know that their longevity is going to take us 5 to 6 years. So at the end of the refurbishment, it will look like one consistent theme that you intended all along, instead of anything that's disjointed.
So is there a danger, for example, I use the term, if you still have lava lamps and shag carpets and they look good and they're clean, you're really not positioning yourself to deal with younger buyers or even renters now that many resorts are concentrating on. How important is that to keep up with trends?
Exactly, it's true. Yeah, you can. The lava lamps can go away. They can be repurposed for something else, perhaps a Halloween party. But yeah, you definitely need to. You definitely need to kind of stay current, think long term, and think how is the unit going to look as an overall scheme, not one element independent of another.
What technology is now considered a must in a PIP?
What we find right now is items such as high-speed Wi-Fi, complimentary, is considered standard, along with things like I mentioned earlier. Lamp lighting will generally have convenience outlets in the base of them. Case goods often are seen now with convenience outlets in them, so that you don't have to reach behind and plug something into the wall to get it to charge and then accidentally forget your charger there, which I think I'm guilty of buying no less than a dozen chargers a year because I keep leaving them behind. And then even smart TVs are important and are becoming more popular. They offer the option for a guest to integrate their own device with the television. Let's say you go out and you take some fabulous photos on your vacation. You can go straight back to your unit and pop them up on your flat screen smart TV and look at them with your family. And then a lot of times they'll even offer the option of apps on the TV, such as Netflix and things like that. So we've also been in areas where they'll have speakers integrated into vanity mirrors and things of that nature, so you can play your Pandora or play your iPod music playlist as well. So there are all kinds of new options, and they're always changing, but that's something to stay current with.
Now, just to dwell on this a little bit further, I know that within the franchised hotel brands, having these PIPs are mandatory for the franchisees, and they must keep up with the trends. And there are some hotel chains that have really done a good job of providing these special features and amenities. And when we have the legacy resorts looking more at the rental business, they have to be able to compete. Is that standard within the hotel industry, something that that our legacy resorts must be keenly aware of?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we do work with a few flag properties, and they're very specific about what's required in their guest rooms as far as the technology. So, and their PIPs are very, very detailed. And Mary, you can go ahead on from there.
Yeah, like Cam was saying, the chains and the brands, it's very detailed and very specific about the technology that has to be there and all the industry standards, in addition to the technology that go into the carpet, the fabrics, everything. In the legacy properties, the timeshares, do need to take note of it, because I think a lot of timeshares now are going after the rental market, and that particular renter would want to go to a timeshare versus a hotel, and those are the type of things that the consumers are looking for, just as Cam was speaking to in the technology.
And Mary, what problems can occur when resorts take a do-it-yourself approach to renovations, refurbishing their resorts, and taking on those kinds of project responsibilities?
There's a lot of problems that we see often, and they kind of repeat themselves. The advantage of using a professional design firm is we have all the technology and the computer software to do all the space planning, so we can ensure the chair is the right size, the sofa is the right size, it works in the room. When you open the kitchen cabinets, it doesn't bang the dishwasher. When you go into the bedroom. You don't walk directly into the dresser. There's a lot of space planning mistakes that happen when the board takes a do-it-yourself approach. There generally always seems to be someone within the board or close to a board member that does have a skill to make things look pretty, but it's generally not that goes wrong. It's the space planning that goes wrong, so that's the first thing we see. Often people don't understand the industry testing standards. So like we referred to earlier, you'll see a residential product in a commercial application. That's a very common thing. And in addition, people don't take into consideration coloring, things matching. You know, they might purchase a dining room table that does not work with the other case goods in the room, and it does not flow. So those are the three often ones that we see. And as Cam was referring to earlier, the technology seems to get missed when it's a do-it-yourself approach because they don't understand the industry standards in the hospitality market.
Now, many resorts are finding that they have limited funds. They're facing these economic challenges, and they may put upgrading their properties sort of on a back burner. Can you offer any suggestions in that area?
The way I've seen a couple properties do it is often external financing. They go after and receive a loan, and then with the loan, they pay back with the special assessments. We took on a project about 3 years ago in St. Pete Beach, and it was 31 units, and it needed to be completely renovated. And they took a loan, and they had a lot of unsold weeks, and the property owned quite a few of the weeks as well. Once they did the interior refurbishment, they went back and they sold every one of those weeks, and then they were able to pay with the special assessment and selling all that unsold inventory. They were able to pay the loan back. So I've seen it that way with a loan. I've seen it where there is no loan, it's just special assessment. And then a very common thing is phased. We work with a lot of properties when they do phases. For instance, they might say this year they have however many $500,000 to do new flooring and new seating, and then next year they do the same amount of money with bedding. And so they get their property on a phased plan, and they spend their reserves. So it really is case by case of how much money they have in reserves, and do they have the ability to get a loan, and, you know, if they placed a special assessment, would they get all their owners paying it?
And Cam, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
You know, as far as the financing goes, obviously they're running a business when you look at it, and the resort management and are the professionals. We pride ourselves on being the design professional, so, you know, we try and create a partnership with them to you know, create a successful end result in a refurbished unit. And oftentimes we feel like we truly save the property money because we don't want them to make costly mistakes. We let them do what they're really good at, which is let them run the resort and give the guests the best possible experience possible, and then let us help them behind the scenes in refurbishing and handling the logistics of everything, and you know, to a successful completion.
My concern, and you can validate this or you know, dispel the notion, is that some of these resorts don't undertake an analysis to move forward on a property improvement plan to get things up to speed with you know, the marketplace, because they feel they don't have the funding, and so they don't begin the process. Would you characterize that as a big mistake? Mary, maybe you could address that.
I think that's a huge mistake, and I think to keep your resort relevant and a profitable business, you have to update it, or people are not going to come to it. Your owners are not going to want to use it, and then you're not going to have future buyers. So it is definitely a mistake to avoid the fact that you have to keep it updated.
And they should undertake at least an analysis to see what has to be done so they can understand what their options are. Doing nothing, it can be fatal in today's day and age of competition. Is that correct, Cam?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Mary, I think this has been very helpful. It's a very good primer, I think, for owners and board members to understand that this is a key element of the hospitality industry, and we're part of that industry, and they have to keep up with the trends, or at least plan for the future of how their resorts are going to be operated and how they're going to look. So if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that, Mary?
Well, we would be happy to be part of your design team and help any property develop a plan that you can do quickly or you can do over the course of a couple of years. Cam and I are open at any time. My email is mary@hrd, HRDorlando.com. And Cam, you want to go ahead and say yours?
It's Cam with a C, C-A-M, at HRDorlando.com.
Also, you can go to our website at any time, and then our phone number is 407-855-0350.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
And this concludes this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio. You know, your views, experiences, and opinions are very important. And if you'd like to comment on today's broadcast or have a suggestion for